Mark Pope has made it very clear since day one that his expectation is to bring home title number 9 for the Kentucky Wildcats. Now that their roster is pretty much complete, can they do it this season?
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Mark Pope and his aspirations for the Kentucky Wildcats, the expectations to bring home title number 9. Does Kentucky have the roster to do it? Going to go over the positives, the negatives, what's happened in these last 7 weeks. And then to wrap up the show, we're going to talk about an ESPN Bracketology. Yes, our boy Joe Lunardi is at it again, putting out a very early ESPN Bracketology. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Are Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats ready to win a national title? He's been very clear about this since he arrived on campus just 7 weeks ago about how his intentions and his expectations are to bring a national championship to Kentucky basketball, and anything underneath that is considered a failure. Initially, this could have been perceived as essentially something to get the fans excited, that he understands the assignment, that he understands that Kentucky needs to win in the postseason, both in the SEC tournament and in the NCAA tournament. He's trying to hang banners, is what he said specifically at his press conference. And I think the year one expectations for Kentucky, at least in terms of the fan base and for me personally, it's not to bring a national championship in this first season. At least it wasn't just a few weeks ago. In fact, Kentucky was starting from scratch. There was literally nothing to base an expectation on, or such a lofty expectation on, I should say. There were no players. There was no staff. It was just simply Mark Pope, and at that point, a dream. And we now fast forward here, and we have a 12-man rotation. We've got Jaxson Robinson, who just was added yesterday. And in the press release talking about Jaxson Robinson, there was a very interesting quote from Mark Pope that really, I think, does start to call some attention to how he feels about this roster specifically. You can go find this press release on ukathletics.com. It's right there talking about how Kentucky has landed Jaxson Robinson and signed him officially. We're waiting to get some information about him signing with Kentucky officially. So he is coming back and he is playing for the Cats this year. This is what Mark Pope had to say about Robinson. He said, Jaxson Robinson is one of the most improved players in the country for 2 straight years and is barely scratching the surface of his potential. His growth trajectory is incredible. He is an elite level shooter, is increasingly dangerous off the bounce and at the rim, and has the potential to become a big time playmaker. Jaxson guards with length and balance and understands how important it is to build strong relationships with his teammates. On a personal level, I'm so excited I get to finish his college journey with him in pursuit of Kentucky's 9th national championship. It's clear. Robinson's expectations, his intentions, Pope's expectations, and his intentions are to bring home title number 9, pursue title number 9 with this roster, with Robinson and the gang. And if you look yesterday, whenever he joined Paul Feinbaum, he said similar things. He said our goals and expectations are clear, and they are different than anywhere else. It's number 9. It's what we talk about every single day. Our job is to come here and hang the 9th banner at University of Kentucky, and nothing short of that is going to be acceptable. With that understood as the goal, there's this dichotomy that you have that on the horizon, but what your focus has to be every day is getting better every day. That's how you get there. It's a very different talk than anything that you've seen at any other major program that has aspirations to win a national championship. Sure, it does get brought up in the early going that, hey, at some point the goal here is to win a national championship, but we're trying to build this thing up. It's going to be a day-by-day process. It's about getting better. It's about going out there and competing, yada, 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 all that coach speak. It's an interesting dynamic here with Mark Pope, where on one hand, he's saying, yes, we expect to win a national championship. If we don't, it's a failure. At the same time, the way we get there is a step-by-step process. And I guess it kind of ties into how we've seen things over the last 7 weeks unfold. It's just how quickly Kentucky was able to build this roster. Thankfully, we're not heading into June and summer workouts and summer practices without an entire roster. Over the past couple of years, that had been the case, especially so this past season. Very, very difficult to put together a cohesive product if you don't have all of the pieces that are playing together. Kentucky this year does. And so even though a bunch of these guys haven't played with each other, haven't really seen each other before in terms of playing against each other in different conferences, these guys have not been able to step onto a court and practice one-on-one or collectively as a team. I think it's a very, very good thing if the aspiration is for Kentucky to win a national championship this season. I think it's a very good thing that they have every single player out there that could build towards it ready to contribute, minus a guy like Will Riley, who could potentially be flipping and reclassifying to commit to the Wildcats after his visit earlier in June, I should say. We'll continue to monitor that, but point being, you've got a 12-man rotation that's really, really good. I think from top to bottom, Robinson's your leader. He just hands down your leader in scoring heading into this season. The expectation in the press release, hey, is to win that 9th national championship. The expectation, according to the interview with Paul Feinbaum, is to go win number 9 right now. They are quickly building this thing up and getting it ready and getting these guys on campus so that they can collectively start to build some chemistry. And that's going to be very, very important heading into this non-conference slate that's going to be pretty dang tough. Play at teams like Duke, teams like Ohio State, Gonzaga. You've got also Louisville rebuilding, which that game has just recently been announced. On December 14th, the Wildcats are going to play the Cardinals. So really, really, really fun games coming up, but also really tough ones as well for a team that has not played together yet. But thankfully, they've got these next few months to kind of get that underneath their belt. And I expect them to go out there and win. I expect them to go out there and win early. I've bought into the hype. I think Kentucky is going to be at their floor, they're going to be a good, competent team. At their ceiling, I think this team could go out there and shock some people. I really do. I think that they could build a strong resume early. I think that they could go out in SEC play and do enough to get a double bye, and I think that they could really make a run in March. I firmly believe that. Kentucky's got the shooters, they've got the guards, they've got the talent, they've got the potential to do something very special here with a group of very experienced, seasoned players. So, should the expectation be for Kentucky basketball to win national title number 9? I think so. Is it a failure if they don't? I don't believe so. I don't believe it's a failure if Kentucky makes it to the Final Four and loses to a very good team like a UConn or Purdue or what have you. I don't think that should be considered a failure. But the expectation is to make it all the way there for Pope and win title number 9. And for him and for this staff and for these players, I'm glad that the expectation is nothing less. You are shooting for the moon heading into this season, and I'm glad that that's the mentality that they have. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Should Kentucky basketball be ready to win a national title this season? Does the addition of Jaxson Robinson change your mind on that? Again, you can leave that thought in the YouTube comments below or hit me on the socials at LockedOnUK. All right, we've got Bracketology already. It's very surprising, but hey, at the end of May, Joe Lenardi and ESPN have put out a Bracketology, and Kentucky basketball is in it. Where do the Wildcats fall? We'll talk about it in just a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. The NBA Finals are set. Kentucky Wildcat PJ Washington alongside the Dallas Mavericks are going to be taking on the Boston Celtics for a chance at a ring. Super, super fun finals, in my opinion, so far. I know a couple of people said they've been relatively boring, and the two teams that have made it there, Mickey Mouse playoff run or whatever, but the games have been excellent, and a lot of memories have been shared with former Kentucky Wildcats, including guys like PJ Washington. Maybe you want to go check out PJ in the finals. Maybe you want to go get some finals tickets, and maybe at this point you think it may be a little too late. Well, that's not even close to true, because if you head over to Game Time, you can take the guesswork out of buying your NBA finals tickets. You can get them even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and then their best price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets over at Game Time. I've loved using them over the past year or so, going to different Atlanta Braves games, going to various college football events across the Southeast. It has always been the go-to, really, really quick, in and out of the app, super fast. There's no hidden fees. There's nothing that they're trying to spring on you. It's incredible, super quick. It is awesome. I would highly encourage you guys to go check it out anytime you're going to a sporting event. It's also not just sporting events. Music, comedy, theater, any event near you, Game Time's going to have a ticket for it. It is the place to go buy tickets, and specifically for the NBA Finals as well. Take the guesswork out of buying your finals tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Almost just hit end recording after reading that ad instead of taking the banner down. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I appreciate you guys checking out the show today. Hey, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Thank you so much to everybody that's joined up recently. If you've left a comment recently, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. If you have any thoughts on Kentucky right now, again, here or at Locked On UK on Twitter. If you want to join the Locked On Kentucky Discord, which is a free place for everybody to hang out, talk about Kentucky basketball, baseball right now, which is in the NCAA tournament. You can talk about women's basketball, football, anything going on with UK athletics. It's a free place to go and just hang out with a bunch of different people that watch the show and want to talk about everything going on with Big Blue Nation. At _LanceDawe on Twitter is where you can find the link. The link to join the Discord is pinned at the top of my profile. Again, at _LanceDawe on Twitter. Can you believe that there is already a bracketology that has been released for next postseason? That's right. The 2024-25 postseason already has a bracketology projection thanks to our homeboy Joe Lunardi over on ESPN. Now, obviously, we've had our gripes, we've had our complaints with Joe Lunardi and how he has approached bracketology in the past. Some of the things just don't make that much sense. Some of the things, as much as he tries to explain them, just don't seem to be particularly accurate. There have been flubs, there have been mess ups. He is, I believe, in the bottom 90 of like 300 different websites that project bracketology at the end of the season as far as accuracy goes. I think he's in the bottom third of accuracy across the nation. But that doesn't mean, I think, that we shouldn't take a look whenever a guy like him, as high profile as he is, releases a bracketology for us to stare at for the next few months. Now that the transfer portal has pretty much died down, every major contender, at least everybody in this NCAA tournament conversation, has kind of gotten their pieces together. Kentucky Wildcats being one of those players. He updated it earlier today, May 31st, 2024. His one seeds heading into the summer are Houston, Kansas, Duke, and UConn. Those are the four teams that he has as the one seeds. As the two seeds, Iowa State, Gonzaga, Alabama, and Auburn. Auburn and Alabama, the two teams at the top of the SEC. In case you didn't see it, Mark Sears returning to college for the Crimson Tide. They're going to be a very, very tough out for everybody in the country. And I kind of take back what I said just the other day about Alabama and where they should rank in the SEC, because their point guard was actually going to be at that point former Auburn point guard Aiden Holloway, who statistically was just a nightmare in his first season for the Tigers, and also undersized, couldn't play defense, just not a very good player overall. But now that they've got Sears and Holloway can be a backup and kind of continue to develop hopefully into something, they're a very good team, top to bottom. They are a complete team. I would argue that they should be a 1 seed over a team like Houston or Duke. I think that there could potentially be that good, all due respect to the Blue Devils and the Cougars, who are going to be very good in their own right. Kentucky playing one of those potential 1 seeds early on this season. You look across the board, though, at the 3 seed, you have got Arizona, Creighton, Baylor, North Carolina, some really good squads there. You continue to work your way down, you'll notice that there are 11 SEC teams in this projected field. 11. Tied for the most with the Big Ten. And this is how it typically goes with preseason bracketology projections, is that there are a couple of conferences that lead the way as far as total bids, but they typically kind of start to round into form, I guess I should say, coming into January. You'll see, I guarantee, you'll see 3 teams, 2 or 3 teams on this list of SEC squads that will just simply be out of the picture come mid-January or early February. And I don't know which of those teams that are going to be out of that race, but I can just go ahead and tell you there's a couple teams in here that are probably not going to make it. But that's the fun of being early here to the projections. If you want to know the specifics, Auburn, Alabama as 2 seeds, Tennessee as a 4 seed, Texas as a 5 seed, Arkansas as a 5 seed, Texas A&M as a 6, Mississippi State as a 7, Ole Miss as a 8, Florida as a 9, and Missouri as an 11 seed. The Kentucky Wildcats are, in fact, in here as a 7 seed. They would play USC to open the NCAA tournament in Seattle. It would be in the West region of San Francisco. That is a very tough region, particularly for the 1 through 9 seeds who would have to play in Raleigh, and then everything else after that point is out west. It's going to be in San Fran, whereas there's a region in Denver, or a portion of a region in Denver, Kentucky's region in Seattle. They'd already be out there, so having to just kind of drive or fly all over the country for that may be a little rough, but that's a weird region. It's just as far as seeding goes, although I will go ahead and tell you guys, if Kentucky makes the NCAA tournament, and I would expect that they do, if they don't, something horribly has gone wrong, I would love to see them in the South region, just point blank. Those 4 regions, or those 4 portions of the region, Wichita, Cleveland, Seattle as well, and then Lexington, Kentucky. That's right, there's a portion of the NCAA tournament that's going to be hosted in Lexington this year, actually, to the 2, 15, 10, and 7 seeds. So Kentucky would want to try and push to be a 2 seed, hopefully, if they could get that high in the postseason to make it into that Lexington region. Of course, they'd be playing at home, and whoo boy, that would essentially mean a guaranteed just kind of open door to the Sweet 16 at that point. Because if you play somebody like, let's see who they have projected here, Michigan or Clemson, you would have home field advantage over against a solid team that would be super, super fun. But in that South region, if Kentucky does end up with it, they'll still be somewhat close to home. If they end up in Cleveland, they'll be close to home. But because the region does end in Atlanta. So there is, I think, genuinely... Oh, also in the Midwest region, I forgot to note, there's also a portion that's contributed to Lexington. So Kentucky could be a 2 seed in 2 different regions, or a 7 seed in 2 different regions, and make it to Lexington, which is super, super awesome. So Kentucky, I think, has different opportunities, I think, here to kind of be closer to home if they do end up making it into the postseason wherever they go, instead of having to be chucked all the way out west, which could still end up happening. But still, you've got places like Wichita, Cleveland, Lexington, Raleigh as well, You've got a bunch of different places. Atlanta, it would be a place for Kentucky fans to go and congregate. I believe they're going to congregate there anyway for the game against Duke, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it Ohio State against the CBS Sports Classic? Any point being, the projection for the Wildcats right now is a 7 seed. I don't really think it matters because it's going to fluctuate dramatically, especially with the early season results for the Kentucky Wildcats. But for the sake of this exercise here today, for fun, I want to ask you guys, what should be, right now in your mind, the lowest seed that would be acceptable for the Wildcats to have entering the postseason? If you think they're going to make the NCAA tournament, if you expect them to make the NCAA tournament, what's the lowest seed that you would be okay with? You can leave that in the YouTube comments below. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. You can follow me on Twitter you can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. You can follow the show over on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow the show on Instagram. That is a Kentucky podcast. Jeez. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all on Monday for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.